I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another daytime stream of the Katie Halper Show. We are so excited to be here with you and to have you joining us. And we love doing these streams because we get to speak to people who live in different parts of the world. And before we start, and we will be having an all-star lineup, we'll be speaking to Dr. Mohammad Marandi, then Muhammad Shehada, and then Greg Stoker. But before we kick off the show, just some reminders. Please do like the stream. That's an easy way to support the show for free. Also, please do subscribe. That way you won't miss these extra interviews because sometimes we do them times that are not 12 p.m. We usually do stream as default. We stream Tuesdays at 7 p.m. EST and Fridays at 12 noon EST. But again, because we are coordinating with people all around the world, sometimes we change it. So make sure you subscribe, but also that also helps the grow the channel, just having subs. Our next milestone that we want to hit is 475,000 because we're over 450,000. And thank you so much for all of that. And also to make the show happen, because it's not an exaggeration to say we literally couldn't do the show without your support. Please do. You have two options to do this. You can become channel members, YouTube members, and you can also become Patreon supporters. And to do that, you just hit join to become YouTube members. And your other option is to become Patreon members. And you, to do that, go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. When you become a YouTube member or Patreon supporter, you get access to early releases, full interviews, bonus content. For instance, the full interview that we did with John Mearsheimer and Yanis Varoufakis, which people have really been enjoying and grateful for. And if you cannot contribute at that level, which is $5 a month, which is less than 25 cents a day, Monday through Friday, but you still want to support the show, you can do that by becoming Patreon supporters for $1 a month. That's literally $12 a year. And we make sure that we have that option. A lot of shows don't do that, but we do because we want to make sure that people who don't have the funds to contribute at a higher level get to be part of the Patreon community or part of the Katie Halper Show support community. And we are so incredibly grateful. So without any further ado, bringing on to the show, show favorite, the busiest man in Tehran, Dr. Mohammad Marandi, who is professor of Orientalism and English literature at the University of Tehran. Welcome back, Dr. Marandi.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Of course, it is always an extremely important and insightful discussion with you. So to kick it off, so as people know, the U.S. and Iran, or shall I say the Islamic Republic of Japan, as Donald Trump called it the other day, in proof of how intellectually robust he is, have been exchanging fire over the last few days. Can you talk about these strikes, the significance of them happening during the funeral of khamenei?
Yeah, of course. We have seen that since the United States agreed to Iran's conditions for the MOU, Trump has been violating all of the commitments that he's supposed to carry out, literally, except for one. And that was expected. No one in Iran believed that the United States would, under Trump, or in general, the United States government would carry out its commitments. We don't have a single instance where over the past 47 years, the United States had an agreement with Iran where it was faithful to its obligations. But in this case, Trump violated the commitment in that he has refrained from forcing the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon and to stop the slaughter in Lebanon. Over the past few days, the Israeli regime has been carrying out strikes and murdering people, including a school principal and her husband and their maid. But other people have been murdered, and strikes are carried out regularly.
I also have to I just wanted to interject one thing, which is that it's just such a metaphor that the woman, the principal who was killed, her name is Esperanza, which is Spanish for hope.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I mean, there are so many such stories.
Yeah.
In Gaza, every day they're slaughtering multiple people, kids, every single day, and it's sad to see that Erdogan during the NATO conference was completely indifferent, and so was uh, Jolani, who was there. There was no talk of Palestine or the promises to have a ceasefire, which Erdogan himself he went and participated in Egypt in that clown show where Trump declared a ceasefire in Gaza. Ever since then, we've had, I think, 1,100, if not more, Palestinians murdered. But in any case, the ceasefire in Lebanon and the withdrawal has not happened. The United States has not released stolen Iranian assets. Trump has re-sanctioned Iran's oil exports just 4 days ago. According to the MOU, Trump is not allowed to threaten Iranians. He does that all the time. Not only does he insult Iranians, but he threatens to murder Iranians, to destroy the country. And he also has violated his commitments to the Strait of Hormuz, because according to, I think it's Article 5, it is the Iranians who will manage the Strait of Hormuz during the period in which the MOU is valid, and not the United States. But he has tried to open a separate corridor to undermine Iran's authority, which for days Iran was warning him the Trump regime to stop this. They also warned tankers and ships not to use that corridor and to go only through the corridor that was authorized by the Iranian Navy in accordance with MOU. And when ships, either under duress or ships linked to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Qatar, the countries that were in the UAE and Bahrain, the countries that were involved in the war against Iran, perhaps they wanted to ignore the MOU too. But in any case, Iran was forced to strike 3 ships, at least, in order to make sure that other ships did not disobey the Iranian Navy. They didn't strike them, they didn't destroy the ships, but they damaged them so that it would serve as a warning to others. And then the Americans began to bomb Iran, which is another violation. And they've killed a number of Iranians. I don't know the number right now, but I know it's like about at least 14. And so the Americans have been, the United States has been violating the MOU since day one, as expected. No one in Iran was expecting otherwise.
Right.
But the Iranians have, of course, used the MOU to their advantage, in the sense that they have been exporting large quantities of oil and importing goods that the U.S. had prevented them from doing during the siege. And Iran, in retaliation to the U.S. refraining from abiding by its commitments, is not going to allow normalization in the Strait of Hormuz, because the obligations that the Iranians are to carry out have to be reciprocated.
Right. So, notably, Iran is not allowing these aggressions to go unchallenged. Iran's chief negotiator and Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, declared on Wednesday U.S. time, Thursday in Iran, America still hasn't learned that bullying and breaking promises are no longer cost-free. Let me put it plainly. If you strike, you'll get hit. Don't flail around pointlessly or you'll sink even deeper. The Strait of Hormuz will only open with Iranian arrangements, not American threats, end quote. So what is the significance of Iran standing up to this U.S. Aggression and bullying and, of course, gross violation of the MOU? And does this signal a shift in the balance of power in the region?
Well, the United States lost the war. I mean, that's something that even neocons have admitted.
Right.
Like Robert Kagan. He said it was the worst defeat ever. They lost in the siege warfare that Trump started. And the MOU, according to Western analysts is a capitulation of the United States. That's why everyone was attacking Trump for this foolish war. But Trump has been trying to compensate by refraining from carrying out his obligations. But the problem is that the Iranians are not going to tolerate that. So we now have a conflict in the south of Iran and in the Persian Gulf region. Trump strikes out at Iran, and Iran strikes back and hits U.S. bases, and so far in Bahrain and Kuwait, as well as in Qatar and Jordan. And probably next in queue or next in line will be the Emirates as things stand. So we'll see if this continues tonight or not. But the Iranians will hit back hard. I mean, they've been able to attack the U.S. Assets across the board during the 39, 40 days of fighting. There's no reason to believe that Iran will do anything different now. Iran has also been preparing itself for eventual war during this period for obvious reasons. But also, I'm sure you've seen images of the funerals, something which Western media doesn't like to show, but we had more than 10 million people in Tehran participate in the funeral. We've had a couple of million in Qom. Far more than 10 million if you count the fact that there were 3 days of a funeral for the funeral. But on the last day, more than 10 million. And then in Iraq, you had millions in the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala. And in the holy city of Mashhad, yesterday, you had God knows how big they were. They came from all across the region around Mashhad to participate. So there were many millions there too. Well, probably more than a couple of million. I don't know, but there's satellite footage. There have been many journalists there. Max Blumenthal reported from there as well. So
I can't believe he survived, given that he's Jewish. I can't believe he wasn't, attacked.
Yeah. Well, the problem was that we were thinking about taking him hostage, but then it turns out that Anya was not willing to pay.
Exactly.
Anything.
It would have been a waste. Yeah. In fact, she would have paid you to keep him probably.
That's actually what was proposed, but we just said it's best if he just goes.
Yeah.
And we'll end it peacefully. So you can ask Max about his his trip here and how he was held hostage. I mean, we didn't treat him too badly.
Yeah. And by the way, just so everyone knows, in case someone's watching and doesn't get sarcasm, that was, of course, sarcasm on my part, and very good, hilarious retort from Dr. Marandi. But no, the Katie Halper Show does not allege that it is unsafe to be a Jew in Iran. Okay.
Yes, and please give her a like for this clarification.
Yeah. Yes.
And what else are they supposed to do? I forgot.
Oh, subscribe, become Patreon supporters or YouTube members. Yeah.
Well, I can't subscribe because we're sanctioned, so we can't do this sort of thing here in Iran. But in any case, so the funerals were enormous, and I think and even Western media for once had to acknowledge it in it begrudgingly, and that creates a lot of strength for Iran that itself, because Trump, I think, was taken aback by the crowds. He sort of had to acknowledge that, even though he tried to fix it in a couple of sentences later. But the crowds were unprecedented and the largest funeral in human history. So that itself is a source of strength, because Iran's adversaries see how strong the country is, the people are, how united they are. And it also shows that this has nothing to do with at the beginning of the war, they were saying, this is, I don't know which city this is. That just shows how big all the funerals are. But at the beginning of the war, they were saying Iran would fail and that would fall. And then after that, they began saying that, this is a rally around the flag effect.
Right.
Now, the funerals are these funerals are definitely not rallying around the flag. It was 4.5 months ago, the war.
Right.
And the sheer numbers just show how they feel about Ayatollah Khamenei. And this is something that I've been saying on your show for quite a while now. But Western journalists, legacy media journalists, Western media, Western elites, they don't want to believe that. They want to think that this is just all propaganda. Well, look at the images, look at the footage. A few months ago, I think I'm sure you recall after those riots, and there were these large crowds in Tehran and across the country. They said this was AI, and X was also saying it's AI, even though it was obvious that these were millions of people on the streets. This time, it was so big and so unprecedented that, and fortunately, they brought in a lot of alternative media journalists to see that they just couldn't deny it anymore.
Right.
So I think this is a source of strength for Iran.
Yeah. And Dr. Marandi, what is the significance of a country like Iraq holding funerals for the Iranian supreme leader? I mean, obviously, these are two countries whose governments have been fighting. You yourself fought against the Iraqi army. So what does this tell us about the relationship between the two people?
Well, under Saddam Hussein, I mean, younger people may not know. Younger people may not even remember that there was a war in Iraq, but your viewers, I'm sure, know. But the United States pushed Saddam to invade Iraq. And the West gave him chemical weapons to use. And ultimately, the United States entered the war on behalf of Saddam during the last few months. But after Saddam, I mean, ultimately, after Saddam invaded Kuwait, which is, people should go and look at the U.S. ambassador's meeting with Saddam Hussein before he attacked Kuwait. Yeah. It's very revealing. But after he went into Kuwait, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. When they gave him the green light.
When she gave him the green light. But in any case, after they turned against Saddam and then ultimately overthrew him, the American, which was a big mistake by the Americans, the Iraqi people towards Iran. And
sorry, you broke up. The Iraqi people, what? Sorry, the Iraqi people.
They tilted towards Iran. And the relationship between Iraq and Iran began to bloom, despite the U.S. sanctions, because the Americans are sanctioning any Iraqi who does business with Iran and punishes anyone who has. And Iran provides Iraq with electricity and natural gas, and the Americans won't let the Iraqis pay for it. But Ayatollah Khamenei said, don't cut the electricity or gas because Iraq is very hot in the summer and people will suffer. So Iran is owed billions of dollars. But the Iraqi government can't pay because the Americans won't let them. And Iran refuses to cut the electricity and gas. Meanwhile, the United States, when Iraq sells its oil, that oil wealth goes to American banks. It goes to an American bank, and then the United States spoon feeds the Iraqi government. And if they don't, and they often don't allow them to use their own money. This is something that ordinary people don't know. Iraq does not have sovereignty. It has oil wealth, but the Americans won't let them have access to that wealth. And if they don't obey the U.S. government, the United States refrains from giving them their own money. So that's what the United States does, and that's what the Iranians do. So no wonder why Iraqis feel so friendly to Iran. They see that that they are assisting them, and the Americans are stealing for the American government, of course, not the American people. But so when the funeral was held in Iraq, millions of people participate in both the holy city of Najaf and the holy city of Karbala. And these, this is a non-Iranian country. Funerals were held across the region, but in his absence, like in Lebanon, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in India, and so on. And in Bahrain, although they were crushed by the Bahraini regime. But in any case, the point is that he is very highly respected, very, very much loved. I mean, when you look at the scenes and the images, it's clear that they have, people are very emotional about him. Right. And in Iraq, he helped save Iraq from ISIS, the same ISIS that the United States created. Right. When Baghdad was about to fall, when Erbil was about to fall, he sent the Iranian armed forces into Iraq to fight also Hezbollah went and fought, and they created the Popular Mobilization Forces that, alongside the Iraqi army, beat ISIS back. And so Iranian blood, Lebanese blood, and Iraqi blood were shed together to prevent the fall of the country into the hands of ISIS. The same ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which now in Syria rule, and the Al-Qaeda leader, of course, is now an open proxy of the United States.
Right. Yeah. Well, oh, here's a question from Brad. Why did Trump / the U.S. sign the MOU that laid out what the deal was, read the Strait of Hormuz and ships coordinating with Iran going through it? Time to negotiate alternative was during MOU negotiations.
Can you read that again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Brad, do you want to come on and express it, or do you want me to just reread it?
Well, I was just
think
wondering.
Brad just didn't want to speak with me, and he's upset,
Exactly.
so he just sent the message.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, why do you think then there were these
I was just
negotiations?
joking. Please press
Yeah.
the like button.
Please the like. Yeah. We have to have a sarcasm emoji that
Yeah.
says sarcasm alert and please like. Speaking of, yeah.
But there was this negotiation with the MOU, and that was then agreed upon and signed, and it laid out that during this 60-day period, ships would coordinate with Iran and for passage through the strait, and in that 60 days there would be a suspension or whatever, in terms of whatever you want to call it, the fees or etc.
That's right.
But it was clearly laid out like this is what was going to happen and this is what was agreed to. So why then do you think the US or Trump would agree to all of that and sign it, only to literally immediately turn around, and then when that starts happening, them to go against that? Like, the time to, if you didn't want that, the time to do something different was during the negotiation for the MOU.
Brad, I think
I
something
think-
happened to your head because you're assuming that Trump is rational or honest, but I'll let
Yeah.
Dr. Marandi.
Well, please press the like button. She wasn't being serious, but it's because he wasn't serious from the start. He knew that the war didn't go well, and then the siege warfare brought the U.S. economy to the brink. He said literally after he signed the MOU, and when all the elites in the United States were saying this is a terrible deal, he said we're 4 weeks away from running out of oil reserves. So I think what he wanted to do was to buy time and to increase the oil on the market, and then to undermine the deal and to attack Iran again, or to undermine Iran in some way or form. Of course, Iran also played the same game. I mean, Iran does abide by its commitments, but Iran had a lot of oil tankers that were stuck in the Persian Gulf. And then as soon as the MOU was signed, Iran sent all of them to their Asian market. So Iran did make quite a bit of money during this period, but Iran would carry out its obligations if the Americans would. The problem is that the Americans were never sincere. And so Trump, as I said, he's been violating all of the different articles of the deal, except for the fact that he hasn't restarted the siege yet, which is possible.
Right.
But so he hasn't turned over Iran's assets, the stolen assets. He continues to allow the Israelis to kill in Lebanon and to occupy the country. These are all commitments that he made to end to bring to an end the frozen assets issue, the murder and the occupation of Lebanon. He promised not to threaten Iranians again. He's been doing it regularly. And he lifted the sanctions on the Iranian oil exports, but then reversed it just a few days afterwards. So he's been violating everything. And of course, in the Strait of Hormuz, what he wanted to do was to undermine Iran's authority so that Iran would have no leverage. And then the Americans, they would not be abiding by any of their commitments, and Iran couldn't do anything about it. That's basically what he tried to do.
Right.
So he wanted to open up this corridor. So if Iran retaliated when the Americans refused to carry out their commitments by slowing down the flow of oil from those countries that assisted the United States in the war, then he'd say, "Well, we'll use our court."
Right. So, I mean, as you pointed out, and Mujtaba pointed out himself, there was a lot of anticipation that the United States would break its promises. So why did Iran agree, and what was the advantage of it in hindsight?
Well, that's a controversial issue, and a lot of people in Iran have been saying we shouldn't have signed the MOU. The argument that is made in defense of the MOU, I mean, they're different factions,
Sure.
different views, and some want to be more conciliatory, others want to be tough, but they think the MOU is good. Others think that the MOU is not tough enough and that we shouldn't even have an MOU. And we should just continue with the war until we get what the United States capitulates, and we get our demands. But what those who negotiated the MOU, and with the authority that the leader gave to them, was that their intention was to buy time, because no one is naive in Iran about U.S. intentions. After all, the United States has sacrificed its own interests for the Israeli regime for decades. So there's no reason to believe that they won't continue in the weeks and months ahead. So the Americans have a crisis, an energy crisis, and we
This there's a freezing. You're being maybe Mossaded or Dr. Marandi, if you hear this, see this, maybe Brad, should he refresh?
Yeah, it's frozen for me on my end too, and so
okay. So where did I get cut off?
You're back. Where did you get cut off? What was the last thing he said?
I was saying that. Well, the Americans have an energy crisis.
Yes. Oh, right. That they were willing to sacrifice. Yeah.
Sacrifice. Okay. Well, I don't know where I got cut off, so I'll go back a bit.
Okay.
We know that the Americans have sacrificed their own interests for the Israelis for decades, and that's why life in the United States has changed so much over the last few decades. There are all these endless wars. And so there's no reason to think that it's going to be any different now. So the Iranians, and since there's an energy crisis, the United States wanted a deal so that they could increase the amount of fuel or oil on the markets so that the crisis would lessen. And also to give them an opportunity to launch more attacks on Iran if they feel the need to do so. On the other hand, the Iranians, because of the siege, they weren't able to export oil and or import medical supplies and food and other things. So they thought if they signed the agreement, they could export and import and improve the situation at home, and also prepare themselves for further warfare, because the United States is quite possibly preparing itself for another phase. So both sides were buying time, basically. But the difference between Iran and the United States is that if the United States had actually carried out the MOU, the Iranians would have done so too.
Right.
But the Iranians, in other words, they are sincere in that they have had the intention of carrying out the MOU had the Americans been sincere in carrying out their obligations. But the Iranians knew that they weren't going to do that.
Right. It's interesting, Dr. Marandi, going back to the representation of, speaking of sincerity, going back to the representation of Iran in the Western legacy media, we have, I think, a pretty rich example of this from a clip of Republican representative of Arkansas, Rick Crawford. He was on Fox News talking to Maria Bartiromo this week. And I just want to give a disclaimer that this is not sarcasm, what we're about to see, shockingly, from Maria. So let's take a look at this.
These astroturf crowds supporting the regime in Tehran but I don't believe that propaganda. I think the Iranian people are supportive of the United States coming in and helping them to achieve liberty, and I think that's the direction we need to go.
Oh, for sure. The Iranian people are thanking President Trump. It's all over social media.
I mean, I said this the other day on Useful Idiots on our Friday Free for All. Like, I really thought she was finally getting it. I thought she had an aha moment and was like tired, fed up with the lies, and like, come on, I'll be with you lying through my teeth up into a certain point. Now when it's contradicted by video evidence, but I guess she really wasn't. She's that brainwashed. What do people how is this seen in Iran? Yeah.
I don't think they're brainwashed. I think they know enough that they know they're lying.
Yes.
I mean, that's how it's been for 47 years. I've spoken to many Western journalists who've been to Iran multiple times. And except for one or two who I won't name because they'll probably hurt them
Exactly.
if I name them. But except for one or two, they're all when we speak in private, they say one thing. And then when they're on air, they say something completely different. And these are people who they're well known. So when we're in private, and one of them once said to me,
"You're watching this in real time. You are so lucky because you got to see that entire Professor Marandi interview. If you are watching this later on and you want to see the full show, which includes a total masterclass in how to handle a disingenuous corporate media, you can do that by becoming YouTube members or by becoming Patreon members. To become YouTube members, you just hit join. And to become Patreon members, you go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And please do like the stream because we are just getting started. We have another amazing guest. We are so thrilled to be bringing on to the show Muhammad Shehada. He is an analyst and writer from Gaza. And he is also, I want to make sure I get his credit correct because he's so prolific. I have to keep up with the latest position that he has. He is also European Council on Foreign Relations Fellow. So, Mohammed, welcome back to the Katie Halper Show.
Thanks so much, Katie. Good to be back.
Of course. And again, I don't even know what to say because it's not like words are able to express what's happening right now, but you are someone from Gaza. I want to, offer my deepest condolences to you in regards to what is being done to your people, literally as we speak.
Thank you. I very much cherish and appreciate that you've been speaking on the topic consistently since the genocide started and even long before that.
Thank you. And I guess I'll start off by asking you, how are your friends and family who are still in Gaza? And Brad, I think we have to do you have headphones on you, Mohammed? I'm so sorry.
I have AirPods. I can find them, but I need 30 seconds.
Okay. I think because there's an echo unless you lower his volume, Brad, and that takes care of it. What do you think? Okay.
I think that if
he has headphones. Yeah, I agree. Right. Okay, great. Let's see.
And then when he comes back.
Okay, we can walk him through.
Yeah.
This is a great time for people to stretch their legs. Also, they can like the stream if they haven't already. And yeah, okay, now let's make sure that...
Mohammed, can you hear me in your...
Yeah, I can hear you well. Can you hear me better now or...
Yes.
Let's see. So is there an echo? I don't hear the echo. So that must be they transferred. Perfect.
That took care of it.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. So again, condolences, words fail at this moment. We are now 1,008 days into the genocide in Gaza. I actually want to start off by asking you how your friends and family are there. And then we're going to take a look at a video that you made, another great video that you made. So please update us about your community.
I think the last 1,000 days of genocide, what it's done to the people that I know there is basically it turned them into ghosts of their former selves. So the most brilliant, the most hilarious, the most funny, the most warm people that I know on this earth are my family and loved ones in Gaza. And after that whole experience, they are now in a situation where the most that they can afford to think about is basic survival. With every minute of the day, the saying about 1,000,000 ways to die in the West. It is the current situation in Gaza. You have an outbreak of chickenpox. You have epidemic diseases that are manufactured by the circumstances that Israel imposed on Gaza. And you have Israeli generals like Giora Island bragging that Israel should weaponize diseases and starvation against the population in Gaza to ensure total victory, as Netanyahu would call it. So you have that one element with the constant outbreak of diseases. The other element is basically shelter. The luckiest person that I know in Gaza at the moment is my friend Anas. He is living in a multi-story building on the first floor. The building was bombed from the top and the bottom, so the last 2 floors are gone. The bottom floor is burned completely. The building is riddled with holes from bullets, tank shells, etc., drone bombs. There is a giant hole that went through the building vertically from the very top to the bottom. It's a 2,000-pound bomb that did not explode. It landed right underneath the floor where Anas is living and sleeping and having his day. And it left a giant hole in his living room in both the floor and the ceiling. In the apartment itself, there is no windows and no doors. There is basically every single wall in there has either fully collapsed or partially collapsed. So some of the windows or the walls are just now exposed to the street. So if you wander too closely, you would fall off. And that's considered the luckiest. There is no running water, no electricity, no sewage, no functioning bathrooms. Israel is still banning the entry of toilet seats into Gaza at the moment for security reasons. So basically, it's just an appalling way of living, and that's considered the most luxurious. And Anas's routine at night is that he sleeps with one eye open to protect his daughter from rats and mice that have infested the building and the entire area because of the Israeli heavy destruction and wiping out of infrastructure of buildings in the vicinity, and the thousands of bodies that are buried underground, and the thousands of tons of unpicked up garbage that is everywhere that piled up like mountains. It created the perfect environment for rodents, scorpions, cockroaches, mosquitoes, snakes, flies, etc. So his nightly routine is to keep guard to basically ensure the survival of his daughter, his 4-year-old daughter, and his daily routine is just pure agony. My late friend Ali, at some point before Israel killed him very much at a hospital, he was bombed and killed immediately on the spot. But before he died, I was talking to him at some point, and he brought it up spontaneously. He said, in the afterlife, I will ask God for one thing, that he forces those Israeli soldiers to go on the same journey that I had to go through every day to find food and water, nothing more. Just every day you go out 12 hours of your waking hours, your entire day is gone just to find any scraps of food whatsoever. You're lucky if you find a bowl of soup and a piece of pita bread. That is the most that you can afford. According to the Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, he was bragging about it, that people in Gaza at most would get a piece of pita bread and a bowl of soup. And you spend your entire day looking for that under constant gunfire, bombing, drone fire, etc. And then another day you save it for finding water, if you're lucky. And you dedicate a single day for just washing yourself once a week, once a month, if you can afford it. It's horrible. The rest of the population there are basically living on the street, in tents, or even on the street in the open, or in overcrowded schools, UN schools that have been turned into shelters. Some of those schools have 50,000 people with sharing 4 bathrooms. A lot of them have untreated wounds from burns or amputations or other injuries from Israeli strikes, untreated, polluted. The air is very much saturated with this thick smell of blood and decomposing bodies until this very moment, because the killing never stopped. And the toughest part of it is the permanence of this situation. Like, people in Gaza would be willing to endure. Palestinians are known for steadfastness if they know that this is a temporary tribulation. The problem is basically they are told this is the new status quo. You either live here or you find a way to leave, and even leaving is impossible. That's the sadistic part of it. Israel is currently allowing only 50 people to leave per day and 50 people back. That's the maximum. So either you stay here and starve to death, or you leave if you find a way, with astronomical bribes. Some people are paying $50,000 per person to come out of Gaza. Or basically the second most torturing dimension is Gaza being disappeared from headlines, from media, from public debates, from the global public opinion, this deliberate disappearance. We know that it's manufactured, that it's engineered. A lot of people, wherever I go, I see people still talking about Gaza with this burning rage against what happened. I was just in Vienna a couple of weeks ago with Peter Beinart, and everybody that I met there had this immense rage and anger towards what is happening in Gaza. And it's everyone that I met, either at the workshop, at the conference, on the street, whoever I spoke to, and they come with this enormous energy. And then you look at the mainstream media or government agendas, it's not reflected at all. This deliberate disappearing because they failed to control the narrative, so they chose to pretend it's not there anymore. And that's what torments people the most, is that they've been forgotten.
Right. Well, I'm so sorry, and thank you for that update. And I'm sure it's painful to have to be thinking about this constantly and knowing about it, and also not being there. I can't imagine. I'm sure brings up all sorts of survivor's guilt for you, which must be very hard to deal with. And of course, I mean, that's totally unjustifiable. Like, you should not be. I'm sure I would feel the same thing. And yet also I know that from the outside, you are doing everything you can to raise awareness. So I hope you take some comfort in that.
Well, the problem about survivor's guilt is that, number one, it is not fully rational. So even if you try to rationalize, it's not me that is doing this, I'm not responsible, your mind would tell you could have done this differently, you could have done that differently. So for example, with my late closest friend Ali, before he died, before October 7th, he had gotten a scholarship to a university in Italy. He applied for the visa to Italy, and the Italian embassy held his passport for an additional 2 weeks because the student insurance that he purchased was about $50 cheaper than the insurance, the standardized one that they asked for. So they held it for 2 weeks, and then October 7th happened, and then no passports were allowed to, or no mail of any kind was allowed into Gaza. So he was basically deserted there to basically with a death sentence, that even if he had the resources, even if his name was at the borders, he couldn't evacuate because there's no passport. So there was the other alternative path, which is paying a bribe. And the bribe is paid to this private company. It's about $5,000, and then it went up to $10,000 to be evacuated from Gaza per person. And basically, I did not have the resources to pay for it. Ali did not have the resources. But my mind keeps wondering, should I have tried something differently to raise that money and try to get him out? What if? Right. With other friends, it's like these split-second decisions that meant life and death for them. So, for example, my friend Haytham, one of the most brilliant programmers in Gaza, his 2 children were bombed and killed. So he immediately fled the area, fled the entire city with his wife to another place before he even got to bury his children, because he understood that he's going to be targeted and bombed next time. And then he fled into a refugee camp in central Gaza, and he was trying to raise money to pay that fee for evacuation and leave. And again, I failed to help with that in any meaningful capacity. And as soon as I thought that I can help to raise up some part of it, the news came to me immediately. He was just assassinated. Him and his wife were bombed in their home in a refugee camp. And these split-second decisions, if he had chosen to go to another school, if he had chosen to hug his neighbor, if he had chosen to go and buy a breakfast an hour earlier, it's with Ali, for example, it's the split-second decision. Like, he happened to be at a hospital the moment that Israel decided to bomb the hospital. Too bad for him. That's Israel's excuse. It's an act of war, so it doesn't matter. He's collateral damage. With other friends as well, one of them happened to be at his apartment. He went there to pick up scraps of food when Israel decided to level the building. Another one was at a UN shelter, at a school, makeshift refugee shelter, and Israel decided to bomb in the very center of it and kill as many people in that strike as possible. Those were the strikes where you had parents picking up random pieces of flesh and weighing it on a scale and considering every 70 kilograms to be an adult and every 20 to 30 kilograms to be a child, because of how hacked the bodies were by the Israeli Hellfire missiles that were used to bomb these schools, or the Israeli MK-84. These are bombs that the US used sporadically and rarely in wars that were the most extreme. So, for example, in Vietnam, Israel was dropping them on Gaza like candy on the most dense urban places. And it's basically this idea that if I had made this random split-second decision, could it have saved one of those lives?
Do you ever think about like what this may sound like a weird question, but do you ever think about like what your friends would say to you, knowing that, like, if they could talk to you now, the friends who have died, what do you think they would say to you? Like that you're beating yourself up.
It's a question that haunts me as well. So every time I think about Ellie, and that is every minute of my living time, and every time that thought comes up, what would Ellie have wanted? What would make Ellie happy? And the only answer I have is what would have made him happy is to experience living.
Right.
Even though he was alive in Gaza, he was reaching the age of 30 without ever having one day, one moment, without ever having experienced living once. Living means to be able to fall in love, to start a family, to have a job, to put food on the table, to provide for yourself, to be able to see the world, to not be caged in a concentration camp. And that is exactly none of the stuff that he got to see in his lifetime. And his worst day ever, every year, was his birthday. I wouldn't dare talk to him on his birthday. That's when he would be the most devastated, because he understood his life is languishing before his eyes before he ever got a chance to live it. And that is the only thing that I can think of that would have made any of them happy, is just to live.
Right. But I guess maybe this is, I've had friends who have, this is different, but, and I'm getting very personal now, but, about my experience, at least, I have friends who have, died of suicide. And I definitely have thought I could have done this. I could have done that. I should have done this, should have done that. And in some cases I do know, like, I can imagine, like, they would say, no, Katie, like, please don't beat yourself up about this. I'm wondering, I guess, if that you ever think that thought with your friend.
I don't think that any of them would begrudge me or hold me responsible for their fate. But at the same time, if I had the option of saving any of them by doing one thing differently and I didn't do it, that weighs very heavily on me every day. And the other problem is that I never get a chance to mourn any of them. So my entire life, my entire adult life in Gaza is basically Israel killing one of my loved ones after the other, and me never having a chance to even process the pain, because you're constantly in survivor's mode. So, for example, my father died before my eyes because of Israel's blockade, by Israel's manufactured starvation in Gaza. So starvation and disease, the collapse of the health system. Back then, Israel was very deliberate about it. They were not allowing pasta into Gaza because they did not consider it humanitarian. They were allowing parsley, that was very gracious, but they did not allow coriander. So cilantro is banned for security reasons. It was completely arbitrary. They were not allowing virtually any fruits. So I remember my father in his last days, when he asked, in his final moments, he desired to basically feel this connection to his hometown, his village, where it was most famous for fig trees and citrus. And he asked for some figs. And I went out to the street immediately to try to find some. And I went one shop after the other, after the other, after the other. I couldn't find any. I went into pharmacies because sometimes they would have dried figs. There was nothing whatsoever. So I didn't dare go back home and look in his eyes and say I couldn't find anything. So I just stayed downstairs underneath our apartment until I knew it was late. He's probably sleeping. And I snuck into my bed. This is my childhood in Gaza. That's me as a child. And the most devastating part of it is after he died before our eyes, while we watched it helplessly happen very excruciatingly, very painfully for days, the only thing that I can do, the only help that I can do, was to basically go into my bedroom every day, read the Quran, and pray to God, please God, take me, not him. Me, not him. And that was my childhood. And even before I got to process my grief for my father's loss, Israel started bombing Gaza immediately. That was Operation Cast Lead, 2008. The goal of the operation, according to the United Nations, according to a Zionist Jewish judge from South Africa, Richard Goldstone, was to punish, humiliate, and terrorize the civilian population. And I remember the first day of that, where Israel bombed tens of locations simultaneously, and you saw those giant clouds gray clouds from the explosions, and it was everywhere. It was encircling us from every direction. So we just thought, this is it. And then a ground invasion. I remember when Israel invaded our neighborhood with tanks, as soon as they go with the tanks back then, 2008, so over a decade before October 7th, 15 years before. And the way that the Israelis would go, they would start bombing the neighborhood indiscriminately to create what is called scorched earth. Then they would go in. That's the perimeter of the neighborhood. The bombing intensively is to basically terrorize people into escaping. And then they would go in, they would throw and shoot phosphorus, white phosphorus, which is this toxic substance that ignites fire and catches flame upon immediate contact with oxygen. And there's no way of it, sort of like putting the flames down. It burns through flesh, even if you try to hold it, if you try to put things on it. I remember they told us put sand on it. That was the only way to cut the flow of oxygen. But one night in the evening, Israel starts firing those white phosphorus bombs all around us. And the fume, this thick cloud of fume, is coming through our window. And my mom, a single mother, she had to run with us children into the basement, the garage of the building. It was a basement and a garage, and it was my father's vehicle in there. And we're just sitting in the vehicle with my youngest sibling at the time. He was only 1 year old. My father had just passed away. And basically us having to take turns to hold them one after the other and keep our hands on his mouth, because we didn't want to make a beep. We didn't want to make a sound. If we got noticed, we would have gotten killed. And just staying all night in that vehicle with these toxic fumes coming through the windows of the basement, and we're just surrounded, and the machine guns of the tanks never stops, and it keeps going and going and going and going. And that was the easiest war back then. That was like, compared to what Israel has done in Gaza after October 7th, this one would fade away in comparison.
And Mohammed, how old were you when your father passed away, and how did he pass away? Of what?
I was back then 12 years old. My father passed away. Basically, he developed cancer in the colon. It was in its early stages. There's no health sector in Gaza left whatsoever. So basically, no medication, no hospitals, no capacity to help him in any meaningful way. And he died at the end, not because of the cancer, which doctors in Gaza were saying that it was treatable. He died because of a severe cold, pneumonia. It was, I think, a bacteria back then. I don't remember the precise name of it. It was basically a severe cold.
So sorry.
And my grandfather as well. My grandfather, he was hospitalized with problems in his kidneys at Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. And basically, the electricity keeps shutting down because Israel bombed Gaza's power plant in 2006. So we have electricity for 8 hours at the time. And basically, the electricity goes down. The generators take time to be turned on. Sometimes there is not enough fuel because Israel is suspending the entry of fuel into Gaza. And that's how he died. And a lot of my relatives and loved ones died in this sort of extremely preventable ways and causes of death. And that's what traumatizes me the most about losing them, is that if this had happened to us while we were in Egypt or anywhere else at all, or in the West Bank or inside Israel, if only I was born on that other side of the Israeli separation fence that is caging us, my loved ones would still be alive.
I'm so sorry. Again, it feels so insufficient to say, but Mohammed, I want to show part of this new video that you just released. Let's take a look.
It's been 1,000 days since Israel started its genocide in Gaza. In that time, it has committed gruesome crimes. Some were blips on the news, but many you probably never heard about at all. These are only 10 of these crimes, and they're not even the most horrific ones. They are just some of the most well-documented, despite Israel still barring journalists from entering Gaza. But together, they paint a clear picture of Israel's brutality and deception, and the impunity that has allowed both to continue.
So for people who missed that, can you just list some of those crimes?
So basically, the idea here is to present the most well-documented, undeniable crimes that Israel has committed, or at least a sample of them, and they're not even the most horrific. So, for example, Israel mass shooting, mass killing, even executions at gunpoint, in the head and the chest, 15 paramedics that had pre-coordinated their entry into that zone in order to carry out a humanitarian mission. And after Israel did this, they buried them in a mass grave along with the ambulances to bury any tracks whatsoever of that atrocity. And then when Israel is presented with evidence about the missing paramedics, Israel immediately goes into denial mode. So they say, no, those vehicles were moving suspiciously. They had Hamas members in them. They did not have their lights on. They didn't have any emergency lights on. And then the phone of one of the paramedics gets discovered. And Israel is in trouble because he recorded his final moments. And his final moments is him telling his mother, please, mother, forgive me. I have walked on this path to help people. Forgive me, mom. And then documenting that the ambulances had their lights on, that the paramedics pleaded in Hebrew with the Israeli soldiers, that the soldiers were approaching them face to face and firing as they approached and then leaving no survivors behind. And Israel continued to deny it until they were presented with this conclusive evidence, after which they said it was a procedural failure. The deputy commander in the area failed to observe them. There was another incident about children in a refugee camp. Shahid and other 9 of her friends went to play football, and basically Israel bombed them with a precision-guided missile. When mainstream media, it was, I think, the Washington Post or CNN, I think it was CNN, approached the IDF with that evidence, and they said, what did you bomb here? Israel immediately said it was a terror target. It was a Hamas target. And then CNN went and consulted with weapons experts that said this was a precision-guided bomb that targeted the children specifically that were playing football, and nobody else was killed in that incident. So they went back to Israel with the evidence, and Israel said, we never bombed anything in there. Forget what we told you earlier. And it goes on and on with these examples. If you look at Hind Rajab, so basically Israel slaughters her entire family while she was stuck in the vehicle with them, except for her and her cousin Leanne, 15-year-old. So Leanne picks up the phone and calls the Palestinian Red Crescent, basically the twin of the Red Cross, the International Red Cross Service, and she pleads with them for her life. And then she's shot. In the audio recording of that phone call, you can hear the tanks shooting and killing her on the spot. And then the paramedics, they call the phone back. So Hind picks up the phone, she answers, she keeps begging them, and she tries to humanize herself by mentioning which class she's into, at which grade is she studying in kindergarten. She's trying to make herself sound more appealable so that they would rescue her. And then the paramedics, it takes them a few hours to reach the Israeli coordinator to ask for permission. Israel gave them permission. And then as soon as they approached the area, an IDF tank bombed them immediately, killing both paramedics. So when Israel is presented with that evidence, and I think it was CNN, they consulted with 6 weapons experts, and all of them said this is most likely Israeli weapons. There's no room for doubt that it's Israeli weapons. And then Israel says, we were never in that area to begin with. And then satellite images show that the Israelis were only less than 1,000 feet away from the vehicle. And the audio recording is clearly showing that it's an Israeli tank that is firing. Or Muhammad Bahar, a case in which Israeli soldiers stormed the house and then unleashed their military dog to attack and bite the flesh of a 24-year-old with Down syndrome and nonverbal autism. And his mother begs them, he has autism, please have mercy on him, keep the dog away. And Muhammad, who never spoke a word in his life, his first words ever were to the dog to say, please, Habibi, enough. My love, my beloved, enough. He was very innocent.
His first and last words.
Exactly. And then the Israeli soldiers, the second act they did was to force the entire family out at gunpoint and take Muhammad into a separate room, and then kick the family out of the neighborhood, and then leave Muhammad there to bleed to death. And when the IDF is confronted about this, they say, yeah, we can confirm that a dog has bitten an individual, and we can say that the family were kicked out because it's a dangerous combat area. And the soldiers didn't provide him with any medical aid and abandoned him there to die alone because they were needed elsewhere. So there is this pattern in which the IDF commits an atrocity, denies it, is confronted with conclusive evidence about the atrocity, and then tries to deny it even more. And that echoing of the denial in mainstream media is what has allowed these atrocities to go on forever.
Yes. Shifting gears, and I really recommend that video. We'll put a link into it, and I'll make sure. I think I already have retweeted it, but And by the way, apologies. I meant to delete and kick out a user earlier, and it's while I was trying to do that, I showed their comment. So if anyone thinks I was endorsing a comment, I wasn't. I want to ask about recent news regarding Hamas. So this week, Hamas announced that they are in the process of handing the government of Gaza over to the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, NCAG, which is a UN-backed, so shameful, a UN-backed committee run by a group of Palestinian technocrats. So what do you know about this decision, and what is your opinion on this move?
Well, first, UN-backed, I think, is a misnomer. What happened there is the United States, the Trump administration in specific, went in and blackmailed every country. And they said, if you don't endorse this, we're going to level Gaza to the ground. It's the same way that they got Hamas to approve of this deal. They were promised, okay, we can get to the other details later about reconstruction, whatever, but this is going to stop the genocide. It's going to stop Israel's military operations completely. And if you don't accept that agreement at face value, we're going to level Gaza to the ground. We're going to give Israel the absolute green light. And that's how basically it got endorsed by the UN Security Council. So basically with NCAG is something that was supposed to be created long before Trump walked into his office, into his second term. So the idea of it came up in December 2023, when Hamas told the Qatari and Egyptian mediators and subsequently the US government and Israel that it made a unanimous decision to step down from government and hand it over to a non-partisan, apolitical, technocratic committee of Palestinian actors from civil society and academia, because Netanyahu, although he keeps saying, I want to destroy Hamas, I want to free Gaza from Hamas, he at the same time insists not to give Gaza to the Palestinian Authority. Although the Palestinian Authority is supposed to be Israel's peace partner, they are the ones that are protecting Israeli settlements from Palestinian attacks. They are the ones that help Israel whenever Israel faces any sort of emergency, wildfire, or any sort of natural disaster or otherwise. They're the first ones that are offering help to Israel. And Netanyahu said, I will not allow them into Gaza. And his rationale is very clear. The PA enjoys international legitimacy despite all of its faults. If it walks into Gaza, it has a stronger claim to Palestinian statehood. And he made this abundantly clear over the years. So NCAG was the way out of this. And it was proposed repeatedly to Israel since 2023, since December. Israel kept rejecting it out of hand. Trump inserted it into his plan. And basically, it was created with 15 Palestinian actors from civil society, academia, former Palestinian Authority senior officials, etc. They enjoy unanimous support from all Palestinian factions because they want to get it done with. They want any Palestinian government or entity to come in so reconstruction could start, so Israel's pretext would be taken away. And this was basically supposed to be created in October last year. It took until January because Netanyahu kept procrastinating. January 14th, I think, is when Steve Witkoff declared NCAG and the 15 members in it. And Hamas immediately said, come and take over Gaza. We're going to give it to you from A to Z. The security sector, finances, whatever, tariffs, economy, education, health, you can take over everything. And Netanyahu refused to let them in. So they've been a government in exile ever since. The 15 heads of ministerial offices in that government are stuck in Egypt, in Cairo. They live in a hotel in Cairo, and that's it. They have never been told where their offices in Gaza would be, where would they sleep the night, who their staff is going to be, what their budget is going to be, because Israel is not allowing any of this to happen. So what happened with the Hamas announcement last week is that what you had is Hamas understanding that the negotiations in Egypt are going nowhere. They are at a complete deadlock. These negotiations, phase 2 negotiations of the Trump plan, are the ones that deal with decommissioning, disarmament, withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza, reconstruction, new government, removing the blockade, etc. So they understand Netanyahu will not allow it to happen whatsoever, even if Hamas accepts everything that Israel is asking for at the moment, which is unilateral surrender, a capitulation, hand over all your weapons and cease to exist. Even if they accept this, Netanyahu will not move forward with phase 2 as long as the Israeli elections are on the horizon. And even after the elections, it's unlikely that him or Naftali Bennett would allow any rebuilding of Gaza whatsoever. Israel spent, I think the number was over $100 billion pulverizing Gaza and turning it into dust. That's the cost of the genocide. They sacrificed about 900 soldiers. to achieve that mission. They incurred these global unprecedented losses in public opinion, Israel's reputation, standing, diplomatic relations. They're not just going to throw all of this into the bin and say, okay, now we're going to give Gaza a second chance at life. So basically, this is the dynamic. They understand the negotiations in Egypt are going nowhere. So the idea was to speak over Netanyahu's head directly to President Trump, because there's also the second deadline that is approaching, which is the Nobel Peace Prize. So last year, the reason why, and it's hilarious, but it's precisely his thinking. Last year, the reason why the Gaza ceasefire or the Trump plan was signed last minute was because it was signed a day before the Nobel Peace Prize announcement. And I got the minutes of some meetings with Arab leaders, top Arab officials from the mediating countries, and they all agree that Steve Witkoff came to them repeatedly and said, you gotta give it to me before Wednesday, because the Nobel Peace Prize will be announced, I think, Thursday or Friday. So him and Kushner just kept openly pressuring those countries to get a deal done, no matter what the details of the deal are, just for the Nobel Peace Prize. So now you have that deadline coming again. It's in October when Norway would announce it, the Nobel Academy. So basically, Trump has his eyes on this, although some European and American officials lately told me that, no, actually, Trump stopped caring about it after he got the one from Marina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader. After she gave him her prize, in his mind, he thinks that he got it already. So basically, those European and American diplomats were telling us that you need to come out and tell him, Mr. President, you did not get the prize. You need to get it. The deadline is coming up. Remind him. So that's the intention behind Hamas's announcement. Speak over Netanyahu's head directly to Trump. And the second intention is basically the court of public opinion. Israel is now laying the groundwork for resuming the military operations in West Gaza, the 30% of the Gaza Strip that the population is caged into. The IDF has now taken over 70%, and they depopulated it completely, and they destroyed everything that's in there. So now they want to finish the job with the 30%. And the groundwork that they are laying for this is this propaganda that you might see. There were some articles in The Guardian, CNN, Times of Israel, etc., about Israel being pressured by the Trump administration to allow some limited rehousing projects in Gaza, but in Rafah. And it's called New Rafah, and it's called the Safe Alternative Community, and it's called the Gated Community. So it's in the, quote, liberated areas. And Israel is being pressured heavily to allow this. But then you read the small print, and Israel is not being pressured at all. This is Israel's own plan. So right before the Trump plan was signed in October, you had Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, coming out and saying, we will build a concentration camp in Rafah in which we will push the entire population so that we can kick them to Egypt after. And it's something that Israel spoke about very fondly and openly throughout 2.5 years of genocide, where you had one Israeli official after the other saying, we're going to build a concentration camp in Rafah, push the people there, and then kick them out. And that's why you had Israel's former prime minister, Ehud Olmert, coming out and saying Israel is planning to build a concentration camp in Rafah for ethnic cleansing. So the idea now is to build this. It's not even supposed to house the entire population. They want to build what is called a model village. And the concept comes from Myanmar. So Myanmar committed a genocide against the Rohingya. There is a case being litigated before the International Court of Justice by Western governments, so Denmark, other European governments as well, I think Germany and others, that are basically saying that Myanmar committed a genocide. And basically Myanmar wanted to come up with a PR stunt to whitewash its image. So in 2023, I think around September, so right before Israel's genocide in Gaza, in 2023, Myanmar decides to build 2 model villages to reabsorb some of the Rohingyas that were expelled into Bangladesh, 1.2 million people. So they built the 2 model villages, and the 2 model villages are basically what you would call a Potemkin village.
Right.
It can maximum house 314 families into dwellings without bathrooms or kitchens. So there is no way that it's livable. And Israel has the same concept in Rafah. They want to build this temporary housing project. They call it containerized housing solutions. So they will use shipping containers stacked on top of each other and then stuff people in and pretend that there is some progress happening. And once they have that facade, that PR stunt, they will use it to get a free hand in West Gaza to say, look, we're not going against all of Gaza. We're only going against the unliberated parts, the parts that have not renounced violence and terrorism yet, and we have a right to starve and bomb them. Anyone that is not pro-Hamas has already moved into New Rafah. The people that are left into West Gaza are the Hamas people. So that's basically the stunt that they are laying the groundwork for. And the cherry on top is to put INCAG, that Gaza Technocratic Commission, in charge of New Rafah, so that they would give it some pretense of legitimacy. I spoke to people inside INCAG, some of the commissioners there. They said there is no way on earth we would agree to be part of this. They're not traitors. They're not sellouts. So this is the only sort of roadblock now in Israel's path towards facilitating sort of a PR, a propaganda legitimacy or groundwork for resuming the genocide back to full force. And Hamas did this sort of stunt in Gaza, this symbolic declaration of dissolving its government, in order to put it in the court of public opinion that if Israel says, we're going back to bombing Gaza because Hamas is refusing to leave, Hamas already said, no, we dissolved our government, come and take over. So that's the idea.
And they've been offering this for years now, right? To relinquish
since 2014.
Control. Yeah.
So the first time they've been offering it since Hamas took over Gaza. It took, I think, a couple of years later for Hamas to realize that as long as they remain in charge of Gaza, Gaza would remain under blockade, internationally boycotted, defunded, terror listed, blacklisted, no reconstruction, no life. So they understood that. So basically in 2014, that's when Hamas officially dissolved its government and basically called on the Palestinian Authority to come and take over. Israel's reaction was twofold. Back then, there was something called the John Kerry Initiative, a peace initiative. And Israel and the Palestinian Authority were negotiating the details of the John Kerry Initiative, the roadmap. And basically, as soon as the PA wanted to come into Gaza and take over, the Israeli delegation left the table of the negotiations. So you had the chief Palestinian negotiator back then, Saib Urakat, saying the Israelis are playing mind games. When we were negotiating with them while Hamas was in charge of Gaza, they kept telling us we cannot reach a deal with you because you don't control all of the occupied territory. You don't control Gaza. And as soon as Hamas told us come and take over Gaza, the Israelis are telling us we cannot negotiate with you because now you're in talks with Hamas. And then Israel saw that this didn't work, so they went to the immediate solution, which is bomb Gaza to the ground. That was the 2014 campaign, Operation Protective Edge. And then there was another reconciliation attempt in 2018, 2017. And basically, Hamas also dissolved its administrative committee in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority came in. They were supposed to take over. And then fast forward, you have Israel shooting about 34,000 protesters at the fence of Gaza that were demanding the right to life and bombing Gaza every other week. And then bombing Gaza with major escalations. There was an operation, I think, that was called Breaking Dawn in 2019. And then Netanyahu starts flooding Gaza with these cash infusions from Qatar that were supposed to pay for the civil servants of the Hamas government and to 100,000 poor families. And Netanyahu's rationale is clear. The Palestinians are very close to a reconciliation agreement. So we have to keep throwing money at Hamas's government in order to keep Palestinians divided. And that prevents Palestinian statehood. And he says that on the record. He says money to Hamas is part of a strategy to keep Palestinians divided and prevent statehood. And then when that didn't work, Israel started bombing Gaza in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and then October 7th, and then you have the genocide that's ongoing. So they tried this multiple times. I asked some Israeli sources over the last 2 days how Israel read into Hamas's statement and decision. And what they told me is basically twofold. The Israeli government is saying, no, don't believe Hamas. This is a stunt. This is meaningless. This doesn't mean anything. And then I asked, okay, what if Hamas agrees to disarm and dismantle itself and leave Gaza? And they told me the Israeli government would say exactly the same thing. Don't believe it. It's a lie. It cannot be proven. And then I asked, okay, what if you have an independent international commission that would go into Gaza to verify that there is not a single weapon left and there is not a single Hamas militant left, that all of them have left Gaza already? They said, no, Israel would say it's a lie. It's a stunt. We don't believe it. It's a performance. That basically Israel would say, those countries cannot be trusted. They're anti-Semitic. They're biased, whatever. And we have to go in and finish the job ourselves. And all of it is just a facade to cover up the fact that up until this very moment, and those are my Israeli sources that are telling me, and there are people with the highest standards of professionalism and with very sort of solid connections inside Israel's war ministry, the security establishment, and they're saying that basically the Israeli government and the Israeli army, until this very moment, understand two things: that they can still get total victory in Gaza, they can still go in and finish the job. And now that there are no more Israeli hostages in Gaza, Israel can use 10 times or 100 times more violence, carpet bombing, invasions, a scorched earth, that they can level it to the ground, and that nothing else works. And the last thing that they told me is that there is this Israeli saying in the military to describe the predicament that Israel is in, which is, if you try to use force and it doesn't work, you should use more force. If you hit your head against the wall and it doesn't fall, hit harder. It might fall next time. And all of it, it's because it became appealing to the Israeli public. And it is very concerning and very sort of anxious to say this, is that the Israeli public, according to Israeli colleagues and Israeli sources that I know, and there are people not left wing only, there's people from the center right, center left wing, etc. And all of them are saying the Israeli public is in, quote, annihilation mode. That it is now the spectacle of destruction, the spectacle of killing in Gaza that the Israeli government uses in order to appeal to voters. So if you look at the Israeli opposition parties, the center-left, center-right parties, Yair Lapid, and Benny Gantz, and Avigdor Lieberman, and Naftali Bennett. So all of those are the enlightened liberal opposition, with the exception of Bennett being right-wing ideologue, more ideologue than Netanyahu. All of them
and
are
Lieberman
saying,
too, right? I mean,
yeah, Lieberman, he considers himself Lieberman
Really?
considers himself more centrist for some reason. Yeah, there's some aspects in which he considers himself centrist, some aspects in which he's crazy. He calls for basically a population swap, ethnic cleansing of Palestinian citizens of Israel.
He's more overtly crazy, I thought, than Netanyahu. I mean, not more overtly genocidal than Netanyahu is how I... But anyway, I defer to your analysis, obviously.
There was this article in the Israeli newspaper Ma'arif, and the article was about Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister and the likely next prime minister. And the headline of the article was, the only difference between Naftali Bennett and Benjamin Netanyahu is Bennett actually believes in the ideological garbage that Netanyahu says. Netanyahu is very much a pragmatist whose main goal is to cling to power, etc. That's the thesis, that's the Israeli portrayal of him. Whereas Naftali Bennett deeply, deeply, deeply believes in those racist, supremacist rhetorics. And in the article, it says that Naftali Bennett is indistinguishable from Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Right. And he called Arabs monkeys.
Yeah, precisely. And he said at some point, there is a verbatim quote in which he said, I have killed a lot of Arabs in my life. There is nothing wrong with this.
Absolutely.
He's the one that was asked about the civilians in Gaza. And he said, how dare you? They're Nazis. How dare you ask me about? Yeah,
so
that's the guy we're dealing
transparent.
with.
I mean, what is despicable weaponization of the Holocaust to justify another genocide? I mean, how disgusting was that? I remember seeing that. I think it was on the BBC. Like, God forbid you ask about civilians after October 7th. You're really asking me about these? These are Nazis. I mean.
Yeah, but what makes it more remarkable is that you currently have pro-Israeli voices. I think, what's her name? Sarah Horowitz or something like this, the Michelle Obama speechwriter, who are saying that you should basically lower the volume on educating our kids about the Holocaust. Because when they look at Gaza, they see emaciated children being starved and bombed and killed to death versus an all-powerful Israeli army. So they think that this is the never again that they were told. Teach them instead about anti-Semitism. So basically, So with Lieberman is one of the Israeli politicians, like one Israeli current politician, he was in the security establishment, at some point told me that Lieberman is the kind of person that would suffocate alive a person with his bare hands and feel nothing for it. There was at some point a couple of decades ago, there was a trial. He was put on trial. He was charged, I believe, with corruption or something like this, breach of trust. I don't remember the precise charge. And then the trial was canceled because witnesses kept disappearing. But today, in today's world, this Avigdor Lieberman is considered a centrist because of how far-right Israeli politics have moved. If you look, for example, at Benny Gantz, former defense minister, former war minister in Netanyahu's cabinet after the genocide in Gaza started, and Benny Gantz, according to the Germans, this is the German diplomat that is telling me this, he said that 10 years ago, we would have never talked to Benny Gantz because of how extremely right-wing we considered him to be. Today, we consider him a leftist.
And he's
So
someone who
basic-
bragged about, right, like bombing Gaza back into the Stone Age.
No, that was
said
that
he
was
was
Benny
going to
Gantz.
do that.
His
Yeah, yeah.
election campaign
Right.
was basically two videos. First video is showing utter destruction in Gaza from 2014 when he was chief of staff, with the caption, "We turned major parts of Gaza back to the Stone Age." And then a second video for his campaign that showed a counter. And the counter starts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it reaches 1,000, 1,300. And it's how many people he killed in Gaza. And he's bragging about it. Like, he had the highest score. There's even an Israeli politician, I think it's Moshe Alon, I'm not 100% sure, but there was an article about him that there was at some point a debate in the Knesset, which of the members of the Knesset in that current Knesset are the ones that have killed the most Arabs. And Moshe Alon won that debate. And basically, Ya'alon, so right wing, I think he was in the Likud, in Netanyahu's government, he was Netanyahu's minister of defense. Now he's in the opposition. Moshe Alon came 7 months before October 7th. And he said, in Israel today, you have two ministers that are supremacists. And then he says, those people, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, they believe in, quote, Mein Kampf in reverse. And Ya'alon says, I'm the son of Holocaust survivors. So it horrifies me to say this, but those guys believe in Mein Kampf in reverse.
Right.
And he says those guys have a rabbi. He's called the underground rabbi. He's called Dov Lior. And he says that rabbi wants to invoke the war of the end of times, the war of Gog and Magog. Those are the verbatim words of Moshe Alon. And he says, how do you provoke the war of the end of times? You keep provoking Palestinians. A massacre here, like the one at the Hebron, the Ibrahimi Mosque, a massacre there. Palestinians retaliate, and then you start a war. And that's precisely what unfolded after. You saw 2023 being the single bloodiest year in the West Bank since records began by the Israeli army and settlers. Daily pogroms by Israeli settlers, daily Israeli invasions in the West Bank, utter chaos in Jerusalem as well. And you keep provoking and provoking, along with the torture of Palestinian detainees and prisoners. You had the Israeli Minister of Security, Ben-Gvir. He filmed himself in February 2023, and he's stuffing his face with pita bread like Jabba the Hutt. And he's saying, guess who's not getting any pita bread today? It's the Palestinian prisoners. And then he reduced their shower time to 2 minutes per day. So there were all those deliberate provocations to get Palestinians to retaliate and then use it to unleash that war of the end of times. And that's Moshe Alon that is saying this. And that's, again, a right-wing former Likud member, former defense minister in Netanyahu's government, that is today seen as the most left-wing you can get. It's an insane political establishment.
It is. Okay, so here, and Israel's former defense minister compares settler ideology to Nazism. Moshe Ya'alon accused Israeli authorities of failing to investigate attacks against Palestinians and said the religious Zionist movement embraces Jewish supremacist ideology. It's funny because people get called anti-Semitic for using that term. So in a wide-ranging interview with the Israeli news site Ynet on Sunday, Moshe Ya'alon said that factions within the religious Zionist movement, which is closely aligned with Israeli settlers, hold a, quote, Jewish supremacy ideology, end quote. Quote, what is Jewish supremacy? 80 years after the Holocaust, it's Mein Kampf in reverse. The superior race is us, said Ya'alon, who served as defense under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu between 2013 and 2016. Ya'alon, who also recently visited Palestinian communities in the occupied West Bank amid attacks by the Israeli army and settlers, described what is happening in the territory as a, quote, disgrace for generations. The Israeli government is encouraging Jewish pogromists to dispossess Arabs of their land through abuse, including shooting at them. Ya'alon told Ynet, adding that more than 20 Palestinians had been killed in those attacks. So I think this is not a single person has been arrested, Ya'alon said, referring to what he described as a lack of accountability for Israeli settlers and the soldiers in the West Bank. He added that the Shin Bet security agency and Israeli police were doing nothing to address the killings. And I think that, interestingly enough, he would be accused of, violating the IHRA definition or perpetuating the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says that you're not allowed to compare the Holocaust to contemporary Israeli policies to Nazis. What's so rich is that the same people who say that constantly compare Hamas to Nazis, and there's actually there's nothing to back that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had an article written right before after October 7th. I think it was by what's his name, Humpty Dumpty, the British pundit, right-wing lunatic. And the article was basically, the premise of it was Hamas are worse than Nazis because the Nazis felt shame towards their crimes in the Holocaust. Hamas was very delighted when they committed these atrocities. That was basically his thesis. And I remember talking to a senior German diplomat from the foreign ministry, and he brought it up himself. He said, "Is that guy a lunatic? I'm a German. I know what we did. I know what happened. The Nazis, they felt shame for doing this. What is he talking about?" And basically, you had that thesis. So now you had a genocide in Gaza in which Israeli soldiers were filming themselves and posting the atrocities. If you look at the evidentiary record of South Africa at the International Court of Justice, it's mainly based on what the Israelis themselves documented themselves doing and posting it on Instagram, on Tinder, on Grindr, on Facebook, on Twitter. They were posting it all over. There was even an article in Haaretz, and the article was basically saying that the easiest way to get laid in Israel at the moment is to post pictures of yourself in Gaza in military gear with women's lingerie, destroying homes, killing people, driving a tank over a dead body, a living body. That would get you laid. And there was a soldier in that article that said that basically he posted these pictures. He says before October 7th, he never had any luck with women. After he went into Gaza and posted these pictures on Tinder, he can't get enough of it, that to the extent that he had to take a sick leave from the Israeli army for 2 months because of how many dates he was getting. So the immense delight, the immense satisfaction by the thesis of that article, what would that make? What would that make the Israelis? So they dug themselves into the hole.
The Nazis who have, worse than Nazis, right? According to that thesis, the thesis being that at least the Nazis had shame.
Precisely.
What they were doing, right?
Yeah. So when you have soldiers that are dancing and saying, not even soldiers, you have Israeli women in sportswear that are exercising to the tune of the song that they themselves are singing. May your village burn. There are no schools in Gaza because we killed all the children. And what would you call that? But even with that, we discussed this last time, and I invoked Norman Finkelstein as a voice on this of clear authority, where he said that it is best to refrain from Nazi comparisons. If a Jew does it, then it is an act of solidarity, a compliment to Palestinians. If a non-Jewish person does it, it would be interpreted as offensive, even by people that might be supportive of Palestinian rights. So I try not to go into that zone. IRA definition or not, I know IRA definition has been questioned by people of the highest authority. There is the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism. There's at some point I was with a large group of Jewish intellectuals of the highest caliber at a meeting in Europe. And basically one of them...
Well, I wasn't there, so it couldn't have been a complete list. Just kidding.
I think it was mostly men, so that's...
There you go,
Yeah, that was a problem. But basically one of them was a professor in anti-Semitism. And he said that the IRA definition of anti-Semitism is actually increasing anti-Semitism.
Of course, yeah.
Because if you go ahead and tell people that Jewish communities should be overprotected more than any other minority, and you tell them and you police every word and every sentence, and you are at a stage where anti-Semitism would get you immediately canceled or even imprisoned, but Islamophobia would raise you up and uplift you to the highest places of power in terms of your career, job, political path, etc. And when people see this, people are not insane. When they see one kind of racism that is heavily normalized and another kind of racism or irrational hatred being completely criminalized, that would make them into a conspiratorial mentality. That basically, when you have people that are getting canceled because they said something like, I support full equality for both people. And under the IRA definition, supporting the one-state solution is anti-Semitic because it denies Jewish people the right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. So basically, if you find a respected voice of clear moral authority that got canceled because they said they support equal rights for everyone, then people would immediately have all those conspiracy theories about, the absolute control or the absolute power or whatever. Like they would question, why is there this disproportionate protection or this disproportionate criminalization of one kind of racism and not another? So that professor, he said that the alternative, at some point he said that even if you try to have a definition for anti-Semitism, it would be counterproductive. And in the same breath, if you try to have a definition for Islamophobia, it is counterproductive, because if you call someone an Islamophobe, that doesn't hurt them in any way at all. And today we are at the risk of Israel calling everyone an anti-Semite, that actual anti-Semites are getting a free pass. And they are Israel's closest allies.
Yeah,
so
right. And Herzl said that. Herzl said that about anti-Semitism and anti-Semites. Yeah,
precisely. Yeah. And basically, that professor's thesis is that anti-Jewish hatred or anti-Muslim hatred are covered already by anti-racist legislation. There are forms of discrimination. There are forms of hatred. So if you try
legislation,
when you try to create a definition, you are de facto creating a conundrum, because it should be evaluated on a case by case, in its specific context, in the specific circumstances, the person that is saying it, because it differs from one instance to another. And even if someone says something that is problematic or hurtful towards Muslims or Christians or Jews, they can apologize and take it back. Saying one wrong thing is not a judgment of who they are. So I remember with Ilhan Omar saying the thing about AIPAC influence
all about the Benjamins.
Congress. Yeah, all about the Benjamins. And I basically conceded that maybe some Jewish people in the US felt this immediate offense because it draws on the anti-Semitic trope. But at the same time, in that particular case, even if you say that if you go to the IRA definition and say that statement was problematic, it draws on an anti-Semitic trope, is that a judgment of an entire person's being?
Right.
Don't we have an abundance of example of people that were extremely racist or extremely problematic that found the light eventually? And you don't have to look far. Look, for example, today in Israel itself, Menachem Begin, the Israeli prime minister, he was denounced and condemned by Israel's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, as, quote, a Hitleristic type. His party, Herut, was condemned by Albert Einstein as a Nazi party. Albert Einstein and other Jewish intellectuals of the time, giants of the time, in the New York Times. And that party, Herut, is today Likud. And Menachem Begin won a Nobel Peace Prize. It's the same with Yitzhak Shamir. Begin and Shamir were both terrorists. People might change over time. So that's the idea of, like, if you look at the Israeli discourse around Trump, you had those pro-Israeli voices that are saying Trump gets to say Shylock 1,000 times.
Exactly. Yeah, John Podesta said that.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I want to say about this discourse with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is that the best way that I've seen so far to combat anti-Semitism and to put it down is basically solidarity, Jewish solidarity with Palestinians. If there are people that are trying to create a hateful stereotype about Jews that draws on anti-Semitic tropes, the best way to go against it is to prove it wrong. And it is those students, the Jewish students at the encampments across the US, or if not now, on other Jewish movements that were at train stations, that were the biggest help and boost for any fight against anti-Semitism. And I remember back then, in some Arab countries, there is this blurred line between where does Judaism stop and where does Zionism start, and when does Zionism stop and where does Israel start, and where does Israel stop and where does Israeli right-wing politics start. It's a very blurred line, and it's because you have Israel that is invested in blurring that line, and its lobbies in the US, AIPAC, ADL, etc. And I remember seeing Arab intellectuals posting videos of those Jewish students or Jewish activists at train stations and saying, look, there is a difference. Learn the difference. Jews are different from Zionists. Zionists are different from Israel. Israel is different from right-wing Israelis. And that is the most enlightening educational moment you can have, is by showing these positive role models. It's the same with, for example, if you look at African-American communities in the US, or Asian communities, Chinese communities, or Japanese, or Singaporeans, the best way to combat racism is basically to create role models from those communities that are enormously platformed across culture or cultural spheres, movies, entertainment, music, etc. So that's why you had the movie Crazy Rich Asians about Singaporeans driving in these luxurious cars to create a positive stereotype about Singaporeans as rich. So when a racist American dude from, let's say, Tennessee or whatever sees a Singaporean on the street, the first thing that would come to their mind is, Crazy Rich Asians. It's the same as why you had movies like Black Panther or comic books like Black Panther, or why you have black actors being highlighted in history movies in periods of time in which there were no particular black actors in that historical era. So you have movies about, let's say, Louis the 15th, and then you see black actors on the set. All of it is to create this subconscious role model to challenge the embedded human nature of stereotyping. There's this brilliant book, I even have it here. It's a book that is called Crossing the Divide. I got it in Gaza, ironically. It's from Harvard University. And in that book, it talks about the human cognition that is very limited and meager. The human mind tends to stereotype as part of survival instinct. And stereotyping, for example, it happens with a lot of things. So if you have an iPhone and I have a Samsung device, you might immediately, your mind subconsciously might try to put me into a shelf and say that Samsung users are cheap. And I might say, okay, Apple users are snobbish, or they're cultured, or they are sophisticated, and whatever. And in that group theory, because my original background is mathematics and engineering, and mathematics is very close to philosophy, there is this discrete mathematics that draws on group theory. You tend to exaggerate the mistakes of people from other groups and sort of downplay the mistakes of people from your own camp. So you would say, oh, all the Arabs are like this, or all the Asians are like this, based on one traffic incident or one bad mistake that you encountered. This is prejudice. So it's not stereotyping. That's the second level. It's prejudice. The third level is racism, which is the mix of prejudice and power. So it's someone in the highest offices or highest places of power that is exercising prejudice with the clear intent. And it comes also with the supremacy. So even with prejudice, you might hold prejudice against people of certain ethnicities or colors or backgrounds or genders or ages, like a lot of stereotypes about Gen Zers or millennials or boomers. Boomers can't get enough money. They basically, nothing is ever enough for them. This is prejudice or stereotype, but it doesn't have the supremacist nature. You don't have inside you saying that, no, I'm better than everybody else. It becomes most dangerous when you have that combination: stereotyping, prejudice, racism, supremacy, in which it is the case study of those Israeli ministers that Moshe Alon is talking about.
Exactly.
And the best way to challenge this sort of racism is create positive role models, create positive imagery. The best way to challenge supremacy is pressure. It's basically holding them accountable. There's no other way around it.
Well, that's why it's so ironic when Jews like me, I'm not being self-aggrandizing. Jews who are outspoken anti-Zionists, we get called self-loathing and we get accused of contributing to anti-Semitism. I'm like, you have to be kidding me, because that is like the only hope. If you think that there's anti-Semitism, what better way to challenge it than by saying not all Jews support this genocide that's being live streamed? I mean, it's such a no-brainer. Mohammed, we have to bring on our next guest. You are welcome to stay, but you've also been extremely generous with your time. But before that, I actually want to play a short video. I have to be off screen for a second. So we're going to play a short video of me actually defending Ilhan Omar from this during this very context. And actually a lot of the things that come up in our discussion are in this video. So I will be right back on stage, but for now, enjoy this video, and then we can either wrap it and you can stay on or depart. It's up to you. Okay.
You say that Omar's comments are both not anti-Semitic, and you didn't have a problem, I imagine, with the first comments.
No, I mean, I have a problem with smearing her
fine.
as an anti-Semite. She said something, this is how anti-Semitic it was apparently. She said something that Thomas Friedman, major supporter of Israel, has said. Thomas Friedman said an applause that Bibi Netanyahu received was paid for by the Israel lobby. There's nothing anti-Semitic in there. What is anti-Semitic, though, if you want to talk about anti-Semitic tropes and playing into those, is what Kevin McCarthy, who along with Donald Trump is going after Omar, what he said in a tweet that he deleted. Soros and Bloomberg and Steyer were buying the election. Now that is an anti-Semitic trope that he definitely played into. He deleted the tweet, but he never apologized. Schumer has said things that are very Islamophobic, for instance, and no one asked him to apologize. There's this double standard.
But no pattern. You see no pattern among some of these newer congresswomen
if you speak out against
who seem
Israel,
to equate money
you're
with
equated
Jews.
with anti-Semitism. Chuck Schumer, for instance, said that there's no peace in the Middle East because Palestinians don't follow the Torah.
Katie.
Of course, we say it's our land. The Torah says it. But they don't believe in the Torah. So, That's the reason there is not peace.
Which is theocracy.
The reason why there is a state of Israel is because the Jewish people were almost exterminated from the face of the globe, and they did not have a sanctuary place they could go to have their own state. There wasn't a state for Jews to be able to call their own. And by the way, it's there, and by the way, it's there, and it's their lands. We don't have to agree with absolutely every decision their government makes, but it is wrong to attack them as a people.
Well, no one attacked them as a people, luckily.
I just saw that tweet.
AIPAC. I'm a Jew. I'm a person. No one attacked me because I don't support AIPAC. Millions of Jews don't support AIPAC, and that's why there are all these alternatives.
But this is the problem.
Because Jews like me are really tired of having AIPAC, which is a very small but very powerful elite minority representation of Jews. It's very tiresome to have them claim to speak for all Jews and conflate Jewish identity with unquestioning support of Israel, which is an anti-Semitic trope in itself.
Let me just say this, Lord. This is the big dynamic. It would be nice if Donald Trump had actually condemned the people in Charlottesville. And you, Matt, you work in his communications, if I could please just answer.
Why didn't he condemn the people in Charlottesville?
Let's stay on
you guys, I gotta tell you,
guys, did not mention Jews in his statement.
All right, and so that covers a lot of ground that we were just talking about.
You were very brilliant there.
Oh, thank you. That's why that Chuck Schumer video of the Torah and stuff. People were just sharing it, but we had exposed it a while ago. Mohammed, do you want to chat with Greg Stoker a little bit, or do you want to? Do you need to go and do stuff because you've been extremely generous with your time?
I think I have to leave, but I don't mind listening to the conversation a bit more.
Okay, great. So we'll put you backstage.
Yep.
Okay, great.
But
Thank
thanks
you
so much for having me.
Mohammed. Everyone subscribe to him on Twitter. Read his recent pieces, and people have been calling you brilliant in the chat, and I definitely endorse that. So thank you again so much for coming on, and have a great night. And again, words fail. Condolences. Terrible that my tax scholars are going to this, and inshallah, we will see an end to this genocide soon.
Inshallah.
Great. Have a great night. Okay, that was amazing. I feel like I learned so much from Mohammed. He's like a genius. He just rattles stuff off. It's great, and he's so he's such an intellectual, like Renaissance man. Mathematics, gets into all sorts of theory. We are thrilled to bring on our next and final guest. Greg Stoker, show fave. He is an anti-war veteran. He is also running for office in Texas. He's running for Congress to represent Texas's 31st district. He has a background in, he was an Army Ranger, and he has a background in special operations and human intelligence collection. And he served during Afghanistan during the unfortunately named Global War on Terror. And we are very excited to be bringing him on to the show. Greg, welcome back.
Thanks so much. And I'll give one update to the, really appreciate being on. I'll give one update to the blurb that I'm not an anti-war veteran. That's Graham Platner. I'm an anti-imperialist.
Oh, okay, you're right. Yes.
Which is why I never really had time for the guy.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, you're anti-imperialist and anti-war, right? Like within, so it's broader than just anti-war. But yes, that's a very important distinction. Greg, before we jump into the Graham Platner discussion,
what a mess. Yeah.
Anything you want to say about what's happening right now in Iran, the Gaza genocide, Lebanon?
I mean, it's all very expansive and also very interconnected. But the bottom line is, from a military perspective, nothing is going to be accomplished from the U.S. imperial perspective against Iran unless they want to try to do a civilizational war of annihilation, which we do not have the capacity for. So this thing is going to continue to get drawn out. Of course, Ukraine, the conflict there is also escalating. It's just like all these things. The genocide in Gaza is ongoing. The attempt to seize the south of Lebanon and other parts of Syria is ongoing. And, after this 250th anniversary of the American project, we can trace a through line to who's inspired who, right? Because Manifest Destiny and things like Jim Crow were absolutely adored by the Nazis.
Right.
And, Manifest Destiny became Lebensraum, which became this messianic vision of an Eretz, greater Israel. And right-wing governments learn from each other. They're historically in conversation with each other, right-wing supremacist governments. So yeah, I mean, I've been getting into debates a lot with people who are like, we're occupied by Israel. It's like, dude, this is always who we've been. Like, how many times do we have to keep having this conversation about structures of oppression and power? So I just want to, I guess that's my comment. Like, it's not Israel doing, no, we're doing it. They're an extension of the U.S. empire. They have undue influence on the U.S. government, as opposed to like what the British Raj had on the Imperial English Parliament back home during the British Empire. But it doesn't matter. We look at structures, and that's why we have to have political discipline around this. So
that's interesting. And of course, I think we talked about this last time, which is that something that I can't stand hearing is when people talk about what's happening in Gaza, and they say, and the U.S. support for it, and they say, this isn't who we are. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you're like a standard like DNC loyalist, which we can talk about, and who's excited for Kamala Harris to potentially run again, and have no sense of history, everything's just vibes. Yeah, I'm sure you could believe that. But no, historically, this is who we've always been.
Right.
And the shocking thing about the genocide in Gaza, and even I, as someone who like has studied post-colonial theory extensively, I did like most of my college time focusing specifically on the British Raj. I lived in India for a time and stuff, and that was my focus. Like, I thought this level of bald-faced colonial violence only existed in history books. But it doesn't, because the structures haven't gone away. Capitalism hasn't gone. So
right. Greg, what is your heart out? What time do you? I just want to know how much time we have.
20 is good.
So 20. Okay, so it's 2:17. So that'll be 2:37. Okay.
Yep.
2:40. Great. So I have a sense of it. Yeah. Your mic is making a little bit of noise, or it was. I don't know if you were touching something but no. Okay. It's on.
How's it right now?
Good. Great.
Okay.
So wait, but question, did you go to college and live in India before or after you served in the military?
I got out of the military after a 5-year contract.
Okay.
Then I went to college, and then I thought I was going to work for the government. And then through like studying anthropology and getting introduced to books like Orientalism by the Palestinian American author Edward Said, which everyone should read. It's dense and super academic, but it kind of started to make sense more about our imperial engagements overseas and the racism, the orientalizing racism that allows for this level of like settler colonialism.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, it wouldn't have made sense for you to have lived in India, gotten involved in post-colonial theory, and then joined the military, unless you were going to like do it as an infiltrator, saboteur, spy, or something.
No, just an 18-year-old.
Right. Yeah. So, what is your thought? What are your thoughts on what just happened with former Senate candidate in Maine, Graham Platner, running to challenge Janet Mills as the Democrat to ultimately challenge Susan Collins. Tell us about his backstory. And, also, you are someone who also served in the military, right? Mm-hmm. And you are someone who is running for office. Obviously, you have problems. Well, spoiler alert, you had problems, or you just said you didn't have any time for Graham Platner. It's obviously not having been in the military per se and then running for office, which you find disqualifying because you yourself are doing that. So tell us your assessment of Platner and how he differs from you, for instance.
Over the past 6 months, like, I haven't done like a hit piece on him. Yeah. I haven't like attacked him, but I have gone on various podcasts and done interviews that say like, I don't really trust veterans, or even as an organizer, I work a lot with Veterans About Face, Veterans Against the War, which is like the left, like the really the only anti-imperialist veteran organization. Like there's other vets organizations out there loosely affiliated with the Democratic Party, and they're still like liberals. They'll be like, Trump's illegal war,
like IABA or whatever. Iraq,
or like there's also PACs like Vote Vets that try to get veterans to run for office under Democrat tickets because they think they're going to get like Republicans or disaffected like conservatives. Anyways, I don't really mess with veterans, especially ones that are like are public figures, unless they disavow all of it. Graham Platner was like still became a contractor after he got out of the military, after he was out for quite a long time. He still says like he loves combat and, you know, he's really proud of this or that. And like, I can understand being proud of like, I don't know, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I don't really have that because we know how crazily we were used. Like when I was a kid, I was super proud when I got my tambourine and I passed Ranger selection when everybody else like failed and, you know, Rangers lead the way and stuff. And then I overheard our battalion commander talking to another officer from another unit. And I was just overhearing, he said, quote, Rangers are like used cars. You drive them until they don't drive anymore. And then you get a new used car.
Wow.
So like, I'm supposed to be like super pumped about like my time in service when that is what the upper echelon over the leadership like thought of us. So yeah.
And what context did he say that? What context did he say that?
I don't know. It was just like talking to another officer from a different unit because, you know, they circulate different units in JSOC. So yeah.
Wow.
So like bottom line is I don't really have a lot of time for people who are still like, oorah, you know, and that's kind of why I never really trusted his ideology. Also, like the whole veteran exceptionalism thing that the Democrats are obsessed with needs to end. You know, like we have a lot of smoke for cops and their like domestic abuse statistics. Well, it's very similar in the military, you know, and if someone's not disavowing it in its entirety, I'm really not going to trust that person ever. And there's a difference. There is a difference between someone who's getting out and is going through a political journey, and I will take a lot of time to like talk to them and educate them. They're not running for public office. They're not trying to become one of the most, as a United States senator, one of the most influential lawmakers on the planet. Right. And now because of this, how did he even get in the door, right? Like, where was the opposition research? Like, I hired people to oppo research me before I, you know, did this run. And we're going to do, after this Platner shit, we're going to do another round of oppo research. Like, how could you run with that much stuff in the backfield in a contentious, I'm just doing Congress. This is a Senate run. That's way bigger. It's kind of absurd. I think only like a white dude bro would think like, yeah, you know, all that stuff would like completely blow over and there'd be no accountability for it.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just watching his resignation video yesterday and it had a lot of Darvo dog whistles going on. You know, he like talked about himself and he was attacked by the shady powers that be. And then it was like 8 minutes into the video when he finally thanked everybody who like worked on his campaign and stuff. It was just very, I don't know.
Yeah. So, well, let's look at some of the some videos. Let's see what we have. This is from an October 2025 live stream on Breaking Points. Let's just watch a little bit of that, and I wanted to have you react to it.
And I think, so can you talk about like how you got into a mindset where you believed that and whether you still share that mindset, whether you're in touch with it and, you know, how that relates to your current posture towards, you know, American imperialism and wars in general? Because we're talking about, you know, people getting killed.
I viewed myself for a long time as a professional soldier. It was my identity. I was a very competent soldier. I saw a fairly significant amount of combat. I also, and I mean, this is a weird, I still work on, I'm going to work on this till I die, I think. I still have I have a very complicated relationship with my time in combat because I think it was all for nothing. I think the horror and the violence that I took part in was completely pointless.
No.
And yet I still have this element of me that when I was engaged.
Sorry, it was for what?
Oh, capital interests.
Okay.
It was there to make money. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No. We can totally pause it for you to say stuff. Okay.
I think the horror and the violence that I took part in was completely pointless. And yet I still have this element of me that when I was engaging in it, like I found infantry combat very exhilarating. I found infantry combat. I found my proficiency in being an effective soldier in combat as something that I viewed. I was very proud of it, and I in some ways enjoyed it. But I want to make it clear, people, I think I never enjoyed or relished in killing ever. But it was more
oh my God,
more like the professional challenge of other people are trying to kill you, and then you have to make decisions.
I had no idea this interview existed. This is so much worse than I thought.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll watch it and then you can react. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, if you want to pause it though.
Oh no. Go ahead.
Be effective in your leadership in order to survive and then like win, and that was how I always viewed it. And the thing that I connect with now is that when I look back through history, I see a lot of people who, like me, engaged in wars of imperialism, wars of colonialism, who that experience in many ways, shapes and forms, turned them into dedicated opponents to it. One of the reasons I am in such opposition to this stuff now, I know how easy it is as a young person who wants to go do this kind of thing for whatever reason, how easy it is to be taken in by it. I mean, and that's why we shouldn't do it, because there will always be young men and women who in their youth are going to be taken into being part of something bigger, finding meaning in struggle and suffering and all that stuff. And if that's going to happen, that should never be taken advantage of by a political apparatus, which is exactly what happened. It's what happened to me. And I struggle with it. I'm going to struggle with this until the day I die. I don't think there's an answer in here, because I will always find some connection and some, I don't know, feelings of self-worth in how good of a soldier I was. But I also think it was all pointless.
Okay, so what's your response to that?
Well, I have in my show notes I did an episode on my own Colonial Outcast podcast about this, about how we keep making the same mistakes when it comes to evaluating leaders or whatever. He says he doesn't enjoy his time killing, or never took pride in it, but he was quoted when the Nazi tattoo came out, and he said he didn't know what the Totenkopf was, that he just got that tattoo in Croatia with his boys because they were killers and they were good at killing. So just looking at the entire thing from an ideological perspective, there was just too many contradictions in the first place. And, I'm super glad that he ran. He got a lot of people in Maine stoked. It got national attention. He started to normalize a lot of ideas that I personally agree with. And so I thought that was a good thing that came out of the campaign. However, now the establishment Democrats are using this to basically do a coup, to be any more DSA. And I hate the DSA personally, but any more DSA progressive candidates like the Mamdanis and the other Congress people who won elections in New York better not have a seat at the table or a voice anymore, because look at what you did. We're resurrecting all the crappy journalism of the MeToo movement, because these are credible allegations against him, right? But the reporting and the journalism and how it was rolled out was trash.
And also, I mean,
this absolute trash.
And the same people who are up in arms about this are people who couldn't have cared. I mean, the Neera Tandons, all the people, the person who works for, oh my God, this disgusting woman, Ashley something. I can't believe it.
Oh yeah.
She worked for Biden, and now she's working for Haley Stevens. And she's tried to taint Abdul al-Sayed with this. These people didn't say anything when Joe Biden was accused of sexual assault by Tara Reid. I mean, they said nothing.
No. And they're the same people who didn't have time for Anita Hill back in the day. Also, they support. They don't care about the Palestinians being assaulted in prison. They say abolish ICE, but they also don't care about how 16-year-old Hispanic girls in ICE detention are randomly becoming pregnant. Like what?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like
It's so
there's also
disgusting.
there's no moral consistency or
Yes, no,
ideological
at all. And also, I believe Juanita Broaddus. I mean, I interviewed her. She has a lot of people dismiss her because she's believes in what I would characterize as conspiracy theories about like Michelle Obama, but I believe her 100%. Believe Juanita Broaddus, and that Bill Clinton was a rapist. And if not, even if not, obviously, I mean, I think these people should be concerned by his problematic behavior with, other people, other women. Hearing them say they're trying to use like untested and unvetted as saying that it's possible that there will be like MeToo closet skeletons in the closet. Well, how about like Swalwell and Cuomo and Clinton, and none of these people went after those guys, by the way. So I just want to say, no matter what, so keep going about. I am curious about your DSA comment. Oh, and of course, sorry. And then we should be clear. I mean, Donald Trump has been credibly accused of sexual assault.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we're not here for the hypocrisy of either the libs or the Republicans. Yeah. So what did you want to say? You said you had notes, but also you seemed very struck by some things that Platner said.
Yeah. No, just taken as a whole, as an aggregate, like I didn't believe he was like an anti-war veteran in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
And that brings up other issues where like, okay, you still like endorse that kind of violence. Like, how does that make you interact in your personal life? I can sympathize with like the heavy drink. That's what we did. We just every time you weren't like at a live fire at night at a range or deployed, you were like out getting drunk, right? It's just part of the culture. And of course I definitely sympathize with that, but like the other stuff, it was just a little too much. And also like when they say like unvetted, he kind of was, because like when you do opposition research, you should go through all these Reddit posts, and the campaign was always on a back foot when it came to crisis comms. There was no like hedging anything, taking anything in the forefront, getting ahead of something. It was always on the back foot. So yeah, I don't think there was a vetting process.
Right.
In a private citizen, you shouldn't have to go through a vetting process, but you are volunteering to be a public figure,
right?
Legislator.
And also, I would say, I mean, I'm not saying that he was sufficiently vetted. I'm saying that they're using that as basically non-establishment. That's what they're saying, right?
Wait, what operative on Twitter posted like, say what you want about the establishment,
literally
near establishment vets. Oh, that was her?
Literally Neera Tanden, who again, not only has she worked for the Clintons, not only did she seem to overlook Cuomo and Swalwell, she literally outed a sexual abuse survivor at her own organization, Center for American Progress. Like she is the last person. In fact, it is helpful to have Neera Tanden, I think, say these things, because she's such a documented liar and such a vile person that it's helpful, because hopefully she'll taint all these arguments.
Yeah.
But I am curious, Greg, like from a kind of philosophical question, and I really recommend, by the way, people watch, Brianna Joy Gray did a very good episode on Platner, I think like 6 months ago. Now, I do think, I mean, that the most persuasive mind changers are anti-war and anti-imperialist veterans. I do think that they are. They reach people in a way that I won't. I mean, like, okay, Upper West Side secular Jew, went to a socialist summer camp, went to Wesleyan, documentary filmmaker, is not going to reach. So my question is, given the power of that two things, given the power of that voice, and also given, as you once said, when you were getting comments in the chat where you were being criticized, you said something like, well, good luck rejecting everyone who's ever served in the military, right? So given the organizing potential of people who have been in the military, and also the kind of conversion potential of people who have been in the military and become either activists or candidates, like someone like you did that, Matt Ho did that. what should we be looking for? Like, what are the litmus tests or the requirements? Because for me, it's actually not. I think that it's not about what you've done per se. There are certain things I think I mean, that's a good question too. Like, but what do you have to do afterwards? Like, I think there needs to be a bigger rehabilitation or bigger, people like to talk about a redemption story, but yeah, what should we be looking for?
Well, the Black Panthers kind of cracked the code to this all the way back in the day. And one of the reasons that they survived their first gunfights with early SWAT teams in the 60s and 70s was because they were trained by their their Panthers that were in Vietnam that came back, and they believed in community defense, and so they used those military tactics to actually engage with the police officers. But in order to get to that point, they were still like a pure Marxist-Leninist organization. And so you had to go through a whole education process, right? You didn't just like, even if you were like a Black person, you couldn't just like roll up and become like part of the Panthers, And this is what something like an organization like About Face does really well, because they vet you, they make sure you were actually in the military, that you did what you say you did, and there's a whole education process. This is our position. This is where we stand on these issues. If you align with this, you're welcome. If you don't align with this, there's other places you can go, like 5051 vets or like Common Defense, like the more liberal or veterans organizations. So no, I think that a rehabilitation program, which is basically done through ideological commitments and through a series of like political education, is what's required. And there's also like accountability processes too, that you have to go through, because like we are not about cancel culture.
Right.
Like,
that's right. Yeah.
Like if you are an organizer in any capacity, that like cancel culture is like shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
We're about accountability culture. And taking accountability for beliefs that you used to have, things that you used to do. We're not trying to cancel people or ice them out. Like we also like work with organizations that are now like anti-prison industrial complex, composed of like felons and stuff like that. It doesn't really matter. We're about accountability. I just never felt that Graham Platner like met the mark.
Yeah, went far enough.
And a lot of these veterans commentators also haven't gone through that process, right? And I do agree with you, like it's a powerful voice because of the grotesque militarization of our society.
Right.
We can speak to it, and we're a check against the support our troops propaganda. Like no person in power is here to support the troops or take care of vets.
Right.
Yeah.
And
you've already served your purpose, just like my old battalion commander said, Rangers are like used cars. You drive them until they're done. We all know that, and we can speak to it and cut through the propaganda. We all have our own roles in this, and I see veterans as a role against the imperial propaganda. And that's kind of like the lane I stay in, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Well, also, something that's interesting is Caitlin Johnstone, the Australian commentator, journalist, wrote on X. She wrote, "Your first clue that Platner was a shitty person wasn't the military service or the Blackwater stint or the tattoo or the sexual assault allegations. It was that he ran for high office in the U.S. government under one of America's two mainstream parties. That's damning in itself." So what do you have to say to that? And also, not connecting at all the behavior of Platner and other candidates, but Platner has been part of this so-called, now I want to be clear, Platner was not a DSA candidate. Okay?
Right. He was not endorsed.
He was not endorsed. Yeah.
People considered him DSA adjacent.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So he's part of this progressive leftist insurgent wave, right? So with wins from like Melat Kuros in Colorado, Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier and Claire Valdez and Zoran Mamdani in New York. And they are trying to change the party from within. And you yourself are what party you're running outside of the duopoly.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your view of these Democrats running within? And also, why do you say you hate DSA?
I didn't say I hate DSA. I'm just, look, y'all, they're very good at organizing. They're becoming like a real force right? And they're really good at getting people elected in New York City, in certain places, right? Colorado, some other places. And, if you want to have the position that you're here to change the party from within, I personally do not think reform politics are possible on a structural level. And of course, a lot of people who love the DSA will be like, I'm into harm reduction, disagree with you. This is like what we're going to have to do. Like, we could build a third party, but it'll take too much time. I was like, the DSA plan's already going to take too much time. Like, I live in Texas. Corpus Christi, one of our most historic cities, is going under water evacuation next year. It's done. It's absolutely done. So you're going to parlay this like political force over like 3 election cycles, have this massive power block by 2030, pass some legislation that will take effect by 2035. It's already going to take too long. All right. So we are using the infrastructure of the campaign and the dying apparatus of electoral politics to organize and solve problems in our own communities, because reform politics are not possible. So yeah, I hope more people like Mamdani get elected, because they're making material changes and bettering people's lives, right? However, if you're looking at this as a systemic issue, I would throw the DSA argument about like third parties or like a popular front or whatever, like alternative systems of government, right back in their face. Yeah, it's going to take too long. Well, so is your stuff, that's just like my fundamental belief. And, I'm about to get hit by the Texas Dems, because they want me to drop out of the race so I don't ruin their chance of like having the Tallarico effect take place. It's not going to work. They're not going to win in this district. It's one of the only 2 districts in Texas that's never been represented by a Democrat ever. So I'm about to get hit super hard by them, attack ads and everything come August, probably. And my thing is like, why don't you guys just stay in your lane? Like, you do your thing over here. I'll go on my Don Quixote quest of like trying to build alternate sources of power, and just leave me alone. But they won't, because they can't. Because even the DSA members are like, yo, you shouldn't be messing with the Democrats' chance of like winning. So I don't know. They just can't leave things alone. And I don't.
Well, and we will have to have you. Oh, we're past your deadline, and thank you for coming on the show. We'll have to have you on again, and we're going to have to work on the on our litmus test, or our criteria for what to look for, so this doesn't happen again. Of course, the other really awkward thing to talk about, and we'll do this on another show, is like, okay, well, and he obviously would have been a lot better than Mills and will be a lot better than Collins. And so we'll have to look at who's going to replace him. But I do think that it was a little tame. Like, it's almost like the equal opposite reaction. Like, if you've done certain things that are really bad, then your condemnation has to be really bad. Like, your condemnation has to be very thorough. In other words, like, you can't kind of half-ass your apology about it. I think that's maybe one of the first things to look for. Greg, where can people find out more about your campaign?
Stokerfortexas.com. We have our campaign positions, and it's very Texas coded. So I'm a little bit more radical than what we see here, but we're trying to reach people. And the data center issue where we're living is front and center. Greg Abbott has kind of vowed to turn Central Texas into the next AI data center global epicenter. So we're like in Temple, Texas, one of the cities that like I was just in last night, is getting like 5 data centers in the next couple months. And we already have a water shortage here, and Corpus Christi is being evacuated. So Stokerfortexas.com. I'm also on Instagram and social media at greg.j.stoker. And if you want to hear more long form content, you can check out my podcast, Colonial Outcasts.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers. All right, this was an amazing show. Just going to read some super chats. Gifted 1 Katie Helper membership. Thank you so much, Yori Gibson. And great guest. Thank you. Thank you so much, Syphilitic Royals. Thank you so much for that super chat. Really appreciate it. Again, the entire people who watched live got to see this whole thing. And then if you are watching this later and you want to see a great segment with Dr. Mohammad Marandi about the media and watch some examples of him handing them their rear ends, you can do that by becoming YouTube members or by becoming Patreon supporters. And that is at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Or Brad, how do they join to become YouTube members?
If you are not subscribed to the channel, which I hope that you are, but obviously you would just hit the subscribe button. If you are already subscribed, that button then turns into a button that says join.
Yeah.
And so
right.
you would just press the button that says
Yes.
join.
And we're going to revisit the Platner thing again, because I think there's a lot there in terms of how we vet people. Also, how to vet, in particular, people who've been in the military, what kind of rehabilitation there needs to be. And also the MeToo stuff, the gender stuff, and the rank hypocrisy. And no matter what you think of this and what happened, thank you, Exit, for saying first two guests were excellent. No matter what you think about this, make sure you don't fall for the rank hypocrisy of the people who are talking about the sexual abuse and while they say nothing about, for instance, Tara Reid. And of course, I interviewed Tara Reid, and she's been totally smeared, as has Juanita Broderick. Right,
or like Neera Tanden, who worked for Bill Clinton, or literally like any conservative or Republican that supports people like Trump and Hegseth and all these horrible, horrible people. I'm not interested in what they have to say.
Yep. Oh my God, Melissa. Oh no, Amy Siskind. I have to look. There's a coordinated campaign for real. Let's see. Did you see Amy Siskind or Melissa DeRosa's recent post? You can't tell me there isn't a coordinated campaign. They're starting in Michigan Senate race too. Oh yeah, definitely. Some guy, Centrism fan account. Does he have enough followers? Oh no, he doesn't have enough followers. But I'm definitely going to listen to this person says, what this person says. Centrism fan account. Katie, you are among the worst people on earth. You should be dunked in a steaming hot pool of piss. Like, why? Like, who is this person? Centrism fan account. Like, I mean, yeah. Founder of People for Chelsea, by the way, not Chelsea Manning, but like Chelsea fucking Clinton.
It's funny because it has to be hot.
I know, yeah. Yeah. I hate these people so much.
It's hilarious.
They are so bad. Yeah. Anyway, I do want to thank everyone for this show, for coming to the show. It was excellent. Please do subscribe. Please do become members. Brad Lander endorses Abdul al-Sayed. I guess he's another self-loathing Jew. Please do what else do we want people to do? Subscribe, like, become and free Dr. Abdul Safia, Hassam Abu Safia. They're trying to kill him. We did an episode on this with the amazing Dr. Thayer Ahmad, and we will link to the campaigns. But it is so disgusting. Israel is going to kill another. As of now, they're on course to kill yet another doctor. And this doctor is someone who could have left, who could have escaped, because he has dual citizenship. So, yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Phantom Sponsor, for the clips. And we will see you, as always, Tuesday night.
Bye. I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing.
Antifa!